Thank you everyone for joining here for our workshop today.
What we're trying to do here is really encourage tenants and building owners in St. Jamestown to take part in a climate change action initiative. We're also looking for solutions that can be scaled and adapted for other urban communities across Canada.
So if you look at the last probably 20 to 30 years, you'll notice that we're really honing in on a lot of red, which means that we are very, very warm compared to where our design and our standards have been in the past. That poses a big challenge for all of our built infrastructure, our livelihoods, and the way that we continue to work and operate. It's important to know here, so the reason I'm saying past doesn't equal the future. We've designed for a past that doesn't exist in our future. So we need to start considering ways to understand how to improve our resiliency, both as a community and our infrastructure.
Climate is very important within the system to solve. And within solving climate, real estate has a really big role to play. Communities like St. Jamestown and these buildings are really, really important. And it goes across our entire built environment. We're looking at about 40% of global emissions, most of which come from operations, some of which come from the construction materials and everything that creates the buildings. That's a huge chunk of the game. And that's why it's so important that we come up with creative ways to solve buildings. It is critical that city governments and stakeholders, real estate investors and owners, and whether it's corporate occupiers or individual tenants and residents, that we find ways to work together to solve some of these common problems. And it's important to view each other as long-term partners, not only towards net zero, but also to creating more resilient, healthy, vibrant communities where we can all flourish and thrive.
In order to really achieve our objectives, you need to develop a culture of sustainability, or culture of energy management, or culture of performance. And then the most important piece here is behavioral. And this is where, unless you get the people involved and have that partnership with people, whatever measures or strategy we put in will be very short-lived. The way to look at it is buildings exist to serve a purpose. And if it cannot serve that purpose, be it because of weather, because of something else, then the value of the building diminishes. Tenants have to be part of the solution. Get them involved, ask them to come up with ideas and make them more inclusive, that process. I mean, MERBs have a lot of kids. There's nothing motivates an adult than kids being told by your kids, hey, you need to do this. You need to implement a policy of continuous improvement. Develop strategies for energy, water, waste, maintenance, and resilience. Building performance is not just about energy. It's about many aspects of running a building operations. And the other thing is that the resilience planning is an important step in your collective effort to reduce the risk. Because one thing to think about is, we always think is, what's the cost of doing something? But for a moment, think about what is the cost of not doing something.
But they realized they should also try to develop their own energy resources. And the problem there is that they don't have any fossil fuels. So they really put a lot of focus or attention on developing wind power. And now they produce the equivalent of about 49% of their electricity needs coming from wind power. They also recognized that they needed to diversify their energy sources. And rather than send waste to a landfill, they started to develop incineration plants. So they burn the garbage and then they scrub the emissions. A heat pump does exactly what you would expect it to do. It pumps heat. It pumps heat from a heat source to a heat sink, and it does so very efficiently. So we can use 1 unit of electricity to pump 3 to 4 units of equivalent units of heat. The first place we would start if we wanted to reduce the heat demand so that we could use lower temperature hot water in our radiators is the windows. We saw in the previous in Bala's presentation that windows and air leakage constitute 55% of the heat loss from these apartments. So if we replace these windows with a modern energy efficient window, we could cut the heat loss through that window down to maybe a third or a fifth. And to the point where we've really impacted both the comfort and the heat demand in that apartment. There's going to be a demand for cooling in these apartments. How do we best deliver that? Well, a central system based on a heat pump is the most cost-effective way to do that in most cases. And we can either install these vertical fan coil units. You'll find these in a lot of apartments in Toronto, but you could also install these convectors. So this would have pipes attached to it somewhere. They're very nicely hidden in this and conveniently hidden in this image. But this would also have pipes attached to it that connects to your central heat pump. And just a reminder, that heat pump can run in reverse. So it can provide both heating and cooling. On the one hand, we really need governments and communities to plan energy systems based on heat pumps and local renewable energy sources, or enable our local use of heat pumps. On the other side, we really need to prepare buildings. So building owners and investors must improve building envelopes and improve the temperature requirements of hot water-based heating and cooling systems.
Whenever you think about transforming a market, there are typically 4 levers when you're trying to change the way things are going. One is focusing on regulations to move up the laggards. It's the stick approach. Standards are useful for organizing the middle group of performance to give them something to aim at. Incentives help those reach further than they might be able to otherwise with their own money. And then you do need some research and development on new technologies.
I think we need to take a closer look at what's the kind of legacy we want to leave behind. At the end of the day, we need to make the community better. You need to get the people, the tenants on board this conversation. And I think communication is key to both what you're planning to do as a landlord and also what the tenants expect you to do, or how are they willing to contribute. I'm not talking about financially, of course, because it does take a partnership to do it.
How are we going to leave this for the next generation of our kids and our kids' kids? That sort of idea. How do we make this sustainable for everyone? And it's really comes down to an inequality issue for everyone to have a fair environment to live in.
We're always looking for problems to solve, which may put people in defensive. Maybe we should be approaching it from opportunities. How do we leverage the opportunities? How to improve the community? How do we attract businesses? Let's put it on the positive side.
I just could not believe that, as Boris Johnson recently said, as he was commenting on COP26, that as we've been building our society and talking about progress and comforts, we were actually conniving to effectively extinguish our world. We have to go from 52 billion tons of GHG equivalent emissions per year to 0, and as soon as possible. But what does climate action really mean globally? It is quite astonishing, and this curve, which comes from the IPCC report in 2018, which everybody has now heard of, that we've got 10 years to make a change. However, it doesn't mean there aren't solutions, as we've heard today. And locally, I think in terms of St. Jamestown, it really means about how do you adapt and mitigate so that the built environment can be safe and secure in the face of climate-related disturbances.
If we're ever going to get anywhere near kind of a net zero future, which is kind of what we're talking about, which means electrifying our buildings and really making some changes, we've got to start with that building envelope and really tightening that up.
Bella talked about just seeing opportunities rather than problems, and just that shift in lens helps us actually come to the table with the owners, the landlords, the city, the tenants, all at the same table, and have a conversation rather than a confrontation.
It's essential that tenants, owners, investors, governments all engage proactively, constructively, and systematically. And we've heard that a lot from each of the speakers and the panel about the importance of everybody working together on this solution.
We all said today, this is not an easy task. It's going to go on for a long time, but let's think big, let's reimagine the future and make it so. Thank you.